My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Maggie, and I'm 34 years old. Today was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. After 7 long years of night school working part-time jobs and sacrificing countless evenings and weekends, I finally earned my nursing degree. I woke up this morning with butterflies in my stomach, carefully pressing my cap and gown, choosing the perfect dress to wear underneath. But as I got ready, something felt off. My husband David kept checking his phone nervously. My 16-year-old daughter Emma seemed unusually quiet, and my 12-year-old son Jake avoided making eye contact with me. When I mentioned the ceremony details again over breakfast, David suddenly remembered that my brother Tom had invited the whole family to a last-minute barbecue party. Before we dive into what made this the most devastating yet transformative day of my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever felt overlooked by the people who should support you most, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story will show you exactly how I turned my biggest betrayal into my greatest victory. The journey to this day had been anything but easy. 7 years ago, when I first told David I wanted to go back to school to become a nurse, he wasn't exactly supportive. We had 2 young kids, a mortgage, and barely enough money to cover our monthly expenses. But I had always dreamed of helping people, of having a career that mattered beyond just paying bills. So I enrolled in night classes at the community college, working as a waitress during the day to help pay for tuition. Those 7 years tested every ounce of determination I had. While other families spent their evenings watching television together, I was hunched over textbooks at the kitchen table studying anatomy and pharmacology until my eyes burned. David often complained about the frozen dinners I served during exam weeks, rolling his eyes when I missed family barbecues or birthday parties because of clinical rotations. Emma and Jake learned to do their own homework because Mom was always busy with her own studies. There were nights I wanted to quit. When Jake had the flu and I missed an important lecture to take care of him, then had to beg classmates for their notes. When David questioned whether I really needed this degree, suggesting I was being selfish for pursuing something that took time away from our family. When my clinical supervisor criticized my technique in front of other students, making me doubt whether I was cut out for nursing at all. But every time I felt like giving up, I remembered why I started. I thought about the difference I could make in patients' lives. The financial security a nursing career would provide our family, and the example I wanted to set for Emma and Jake about following your dreams, no matter how difficult the path becomes. This morning, as I laid out my cap and gown on the bed, all those struggles felt worth it. The burgundy fabric represented years of sacrifice, late-night study sessions, and moments when I chose perseverance over comfort. I had practiced walking across the stage in my bedroom, imagining the weight of that diploma in my hands and the pride on my family's faces as they watched from the audience. But something was wrong. David kept stepping outside to take phone calls, speaking in hushed tones that made me strain to hear. When I asked who kept calling, he brushed off my questions with vague answers about work emergencies. Emma spent most of breakfast texting furiously, her thumbs flying across her phone screen with an urgency that seemed excessive for typical teenage communication. Jake, usually chatty in the mornings, barely spoke except to ask for more orange juice. When I mentioned for the 3rd time that the ceremony started at 2 o'clock and that we should leave by noon to get good seats, David's face changed. He got that look he always wore when he was about to deliver bad news, the same expression he had when he told me we couldn't afford the family vacation I had been planning for months. "Actually, honey," he said slowly, "Tom called this morning. He's having a barbecue today and really wants the whole family there. You know how he gets when people don't show up to his parties." My heart sank. Tom, my older brother, had a habit of scheduling family events at the most inconvenient times, then guilt-tripping everyone who couldn't attend. But this was my graduation day. Surely David understood the significance of this milestone, the culmination of everything I had worked toward for nearly a decade. "But this is my graduation," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "Can't we go to Tom's barbecue after the ceremony? It shouldn't run too late." David shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Tom said it's really important that we're there on time. Something about wanting to make an announcement or something. Besides, graduation ceremonies are so long and boring. We'll celebrate your accomplishment at home later. The casual dismissal of my achievement stung more than I wanted to admit. I looked at Emma and Jake, hoping they would advocate for attending my ceremony, but they both suddenly became very interested in their breakfast plates. Emma mumbled something about promising her friend she would help set up for Tom's party, while Jake claimed he had already made plans to play video games with his cousins. I felt the first crack in my heart, but I pushed down the disappointment. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Family was important, and Tom did have a tendency to hold grudges when people missed his events. Perhaps they were right that the ceremony would be boring for the kids, and we could have our own private celebration later. Okay, I said quietly, forcing a smile. I guess I'll see you all there afterward then. By 11:30, my excitement had transformed into a gnawing anxiety that settled in my stomach like a stone. I arrived at the university campus 3 hours before the ceremony, hoping against hope that my family would surprise me by showing up early for photos and pre-celebration festivities. The parking lot was already filling with graduates and their families, and everywhere I looked I saw scenes that made my heart ache with longing. A girl about Emma's age was helping her mother adjust her cap, both of them laughing as they tried to get the tassel positioned correctly. An elderly couple stood proudly next to their adult son, the father holding a bouquet of roses, while the mother snapped photo after photo with her phone. Small children ran around in their Sunday best, clutching balloons and homemade signs congratulating their graduating family members. I pulled out my phone and texted David. Just arrived at campus. When do you think you'll be able to leave Tom's party? The message showed as delivered, but no response came. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. His casual recorded voice instructed callers to leave a message promising he would get back to them as soon as possible. Next, I tried Emma's phone. It rang once before going to voicemail, suggesting she had declined the call. The automated message played her voice from 2 years ago when she was 14 and thought it was hilarious to record her greeting in a fake British accent. Under normal circumstances, hearing it would have made me smile. Today it felt like a door slamming in my face. Jake's tablet was connected to our family plan, so I tried reaching him through the messaging app we used to communicate when he was at friends' houses. The message showed as delivered and read, but no response appeared. Even my 12-year-old son was ignoring me on what should have been one of the most important days of my life. I found myself standing alone near the main entrance to the auditorium, watching other families take pictures and share excited conversations about their graduates' future plans. A woman about my age approached me wearing a guest badge and carrying a professional-looking camera with a long lens. "Are you Margaret?" she asked with a warm smile. "I'm Sandra Kelly's mom. Kelly mentioned you two studied together for the pharmacology final." I remembered Kelly, a sweet girl in her early 20s who had been one of my study partners during our most challenging semester. We had spent hours together in the library, quizzing each other on drug interactions and dosage calculations. "Yes, that's me," I replied, grateful for the familiar face. "Is Kelly excited about graduation?" "Oh my goodness, she's been planning this day for months," Sandra laughed. "She made us all matching t-shirts with her graduation photo on them. My whole family drove down from Michigan just to be here. Where's your cheering section?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "They're running a little late," I managed to say. "You know how families can be." Sandra nodded sympathetically. "Well, I'm sure they'll be here soon. This is such a huge accomplishment. Kelly told me you've been in school for 7 years while raising kids. That's incredible dedication." After Sandra walked away to rejoin her family's photo session, I tried calling my mother. Mom answered on the third ring, her voice sounding strained and uncomfortable. "Oh, honey, congratulations on your big day," she said, but something in her tone felt forced. "I'm so proud of you for sticking with it all these years." "Thanks, Mom. Are you planning to come to the ceremony? I know it's short notice, but it would mean the world to me to have you there." There was a long pause. Well, sweetheart, I'm actually already at Tom's house. He really wanted the whole family here today for this barbecue. He said it was important that everyone attend. My mother's words felt like a betrayal. Tom's barbecue was more important than her daughter's college graduation. Mom, this is my graduation day. I've been working toward this for 7 years. I know, honey, and we're all so proud of you. But you know how Tom gets when people don't show up to his events. He's been planning this for weeks, and he specifically asked me to be here early to help with preparations. After hanging up, I called my sister Jennifer. Her response was almost identical, filled with apologies and explanations about prior commitments to Tom's gathering. It became clear that every single member of my extended family had chosen my brother's last-minute barbecue over my graduation ceremony. I stood there in my cap and gown diploma cover clutched in my hands, watching families celebrate around me while fighting back tears. Fellow graduates occasionally approached me asking where my family was seated, so they could save spots or coordinate photos. Each time I had to come up with new excuses, my voice becoming smaller and more strained with each explanation. The worst part wasn't just that they weren't coming. It was the realization that this pattern had been going on for years, and I'd been too focused on my goals to see it clearly. Every time I had an important moment, something related to Tom somehow took precedence. When I completed my first semester with straight A's, Tom had chosen that same weekend to host a surprise party for his girlfriend, requiring all hands on deck for decorations and food preparation. When I received an award for academic excellence in my third year, Tom had scheduled his annual Super Bowl party, insisting that family tradition couldn't be broken. I had always told myself that Tom just had bad timing, that these scheduling conflicts were coincidental. But standing alone on my graduation day, surrounded by other people's loving families, I finally saw the truth. This wasn't coincidence. This was a pattern of my achievements being consistently overshadowed by Tom's need to be the center of attention. As the crowd began moving toward the auditorium entrance, I realized with crushing certainty that no one was coming. My husband, my children, my mother, my sister, and my extended family had all chosen a casual barbecue over celebrating the biggest accomplishment of my life. The graduation ceremony began at exactly 2 o'clock, and I found myself sitting in the third row of the designated graduate section, constantly scanning the audience for any sign of my family. The auditorium was packed with proud relatives, their faces glowing with excitement as they waited to see their loved ones receive their diplomas. I kept my phone on silent in my lap, checking for messages every few minutes, hoping for a text saying they were running late but on their way. Nothing came. As the dean welcomed everyone to the ceremony, I tried to focus on the magnitude of what I had accomplished. 7 years ago, when I first walked into that community college classroom, I never could have imagined how difficult the journey would be. Back then, Emma was 9 and Jake was 5, both still young enough to need constant attention and care. David was working long hours at the auto parts store, and money was always tight. I remembered those first few months of classes when I questioned whether I was crazy for trying to pursue a degree while managing a household and working part-time. The other students in my program were mostly in their early 20s, fresh out of high school with no major responsibilities outside of their studies. They could afford to spend entire weekends in the library, while I had to squeeze my studying into the few hours between putting the kids to bed and falling asleep from exhaustion. There were nights when I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by textbooks and notes, fighting to stay awake long enough to review material for the next day's exam. David would walk through the kitchen, shaking his head at the mess of papers and highlighting markers, muttering about how the house was always in chaos because of my schoolwork. "Is this really worth it?" he asked more than once. "You're killing yourself, and for what? So you can work harder for not much more money than you're making at the restaurant." But I knew it was worth it. Every time I shadowed a nurse during my clinical rotations, watching them provide comfort to scared patients and make split-second decisions that could save lives, I felt a sense of purpose I had never experienced before. This wasn't just about earning more money, though the financial stability would certainly help our family. This was about becoming the person I was meant to be, using my natural compassion and newly developed skills to make a real difference in the world. The sacrifices had been enormous. While other mothers attended their children's school events and sports games, I was often stuck in class or studying for exams. I missed Emma's first high school dance because I had a clinical rotation that weekend. I couldn't volunteer for Jake's field trip to the science museum because I had a pharmacology exam the next day that I couldn't afford to fail. Emma and Jake learned to be remarkably independent during those years. Emma became expert at helping Jake with his homework when I wasn't available, and both kids could prepare simple meals when I was running late from class. Sometimes I worried that I was asking too much of them, that they were growing up too fast because of my educational pursuits. But I also hoped I was teaching them something valuable about persistence and following your dreams even when the path is difficult and other people don't understand your choices. As the ceremony progressed and speakers talked about achievement and perseverance, I thought about all the times my family had seemed to resent my dedication to school. David's complaints about frozen dinners and messy kitchen tables. Emma's eye rolls when I couldn't drive her to the mall because I had studying to do. Jake's disappointed sighs when I couldn't play video games with him because I had papers to write. Tom had been particularly unsupportive, often making comments about how I was trying to be something I'm not, and suggesting that I was neglecting my real responsibilities as a wife and mother. During family gatherings, he would make jokes about my textbooks and studying habits, calling me the professional student in a tone that made it clear he didn't consider my efforts admirable. Now, as my section was called to line up for the diploma ceremony, I realized that none of them truly understood what this moment meant to me. They saw my graduation as an inconvenience that interfered with their preferred weekend plans, rather than recognizing it as the culmination of years of sacrifice and determination. When the dean began calling names alphabetically, my heart started pounding. I was somewhere in the middle of the M surnames, which meant I had several minutes to prepare myself for walking across that stage alone with no family members cheering from the audience. "Margaret Louise Mitchell," the dean announced, and I stood up on shaking legs. The walk to the stage felt both endless and too short. As I climbed the steps and approached the dean, I could hear scattered applause from the audience, mostly from other graduates' families who were being polite to everyone receiving diplomas. But there was no special cheer for me, no proud family members calling out my name or taking pictures of this momentous occasion. The dean shook my hand firmly and placed the diploma in my grasp. The weight of it surprised me. It was heavier than I had expected, as if it contained all the hours of studying, all the sleepless nights, all the moments of doubt and determination that had led to this point. For just a moment, as I held that diploma and looked out at the audience, I felt incredibly proud of myself. Regardless of who was or wasn't there to witness it, I had done something remarkable. I had pursued a dream that seemed impossible, overcome obstacles that sometimes felt insurmountable, and achieved a goal that would change the trajectory of my entire life. But as I walked off the stage and returned to my seat, the loneliness crashed over me again. This should have been a moment of shared joy, a memory my family would talk about for years to come. Instead, it was a solitary achievement witnessed only by strangers who would forget my name before they left the parking lot. The ceremony continued around me, but I felt disconnected from the celebration. Other graduates hugged their families afterward, posed for countless photos, and made plans for dinner at special restaurants. I sat alone, clutching my diploma, and wondering how the people who were supposed to love me most could have chosen a casual barbecue over this once-in-a-lifetime moment. The moment I walked off the graduation stage, my phone buzzed with a text message. My heart leaped, thinking it might be David with an apology and explanation for missing the ceremony. Instead, the message was brief and ominous. "We need to talk, urgently." No congratulations, no acknowledgement of my achievement, just a cold, businesslike demand for a conversation that sounded anything but celebratory. I tried calling him immediately, but the phone went straight to voicemail again. A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I gathered my belongings and walked to the parking lot, still wearing my cap and gown. Around me, other graduates were taking pictures with their families, everyone laughing and talking about dinner plans and celebration parties. The drive home felt surreal. I kept the graduation cap on my head as if wearing it would make the day feel more real, more meaningful. Through the rearview mirror, I could see the tassel swaying as I navigated traffic, a small reminder that something important had actually happened today, even if no one I loved had been there to witness it. When I pulled into our driveway, the house was completely dark. David's truck wasn't in its usual spot, and Emma's car was also missing. I sat in my car for several minutes, still wearing my graduation regalia, staring at our empty house and trying to process the growing dread in my chest. I walked through the front door, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor in the silence. The house felt different somehow, as if something fundamental had shifted in the few hours I had been gone. I placed my diploma on the kitchen table, the same table where I had spent countless nights studying, and sat down to wait. The waiting was torture. I tried texting David again, asking where he was and when he would be home. No response. I called Emma's phone and left a voicemail asking her to call me back. I even tried reaching Jake through his gaming console, but he appeared to be offline. By 6 o'clock, I was pacing the kitchen, still wearing my cap and gown, like some kind of tragic costume. I had imagined this evening so differently. I thought we would go out to dinner at a nice restaurant, maybe the Italian place downtown that we only visited on special occasions. I had pictured Emma and Jake telling me they were proud of me, and David acknowledging how hard I had worked to reach this goal. Instead, I was alone in a silent house wearing graduation attire that now felt foolish and overly optimistic. Finally, around 7:30, I heard cars pulling into the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see David's truck and Emma's car both returning at the same time. As they walked toward the house, I could hear them laughing about something, their voices carrying the relaxed, satisfied tone of people who had just enjoyed a pleasant afternoon. When they walked through the front door, they were still chuckling about some story from Tom's barbecue. David was carrying a container of leftover food, and Emma had what looked like a slice of cake wrapped in aluminum foil. Jake bounded in behind them, his face sticky with barbecue sauce, and his shirt stained with grass from playing in Tom's backyard. None of them immediately acknowledged me sitting at the kitchen table in my graduation cap and gown, diploma displayed in front of me like evidence of what they had missed. "Oh, hey, Mom," Emma said casually, as if she were greeting me on any ordinary day. "How was the graduation thing?" The graduation thing. 7 years of sacrifice and struggle reduced to a thing that rated somewhere below a barbecue on the family priority list. "It was fine," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and hollow even to my own ears. David set the leftover container on the counter and turned to face me, his expression serious and uncomfortable. "Kids go upstairs and get cleaned up for dinner." He said, his tone suggesting this wasn't a request. Emma and Jake both seemed to sense the tension in the room. They gathered their things and hurried upstairs without their usual complaints or attempts to negotiate for more time before having to do what they were told. Once we were alone, David sat down across from me at the kitchen table, carefully avoiding looking directly at my diploma or graduation attire. "Maggie," he began, and I knew from his tone that whatever came next was going to shatter what remained of this already devastating day. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I've realized that we have some serious problems in our marriage." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. "What kind of problems?" "You've changed," he said, his voice taking on the rehearsed quality of someone who had practiced this conversation. "Ever since you started this whole nursing school thing, you've become a different person. You're never present with the family anymore. You're always buried in books or rushing off to class or clinical rotations. I feel like I'm married to a stranger." The accusations hit me like physical blows. "David, I just graduated today. I thought you would be proud of what I accomplished." He shook his head. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. Everything is always about your accomplishments, your goals, your dreams. What about what I need? What about what the kids need? We've been living in chaos for 7 years while you pursued this selfish fantasy." Selfish fantasy. I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. This nursing degree is going to help our entire family. The salary increase alone will take pressure off our finances. We were fine before, David said firmly. We didn't need you to completely upend our lives just so you could feel important or accomplished, or whatever this is really about. As he continued talking, laying out his complaints about my changed priorities and alleged neglect of family responsibilities, I began to understand something that made my blood run cold. This conversation, this timing, the family barbecue that had pulled everyone away from my graduation, none of it was coincidental. David, I interrupted, did you plan this? Did you deliberately schedule this conversation for today? His slight hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Tom's barbecue. I continued, pieces falling into place in my mind. You knew about that beforehand. You helped plan it, didn't you? You wanted to make sure the family wasn't at my graduation. It's not like that, David said, but his denial lacked conviction. Then what is it like? I demanded, standing up so quickly that my chair scraped against the floor. Explain to me how my entire family ended up at a last-minute barbecue on the same day I graduated from nursing school after 7 years of work. David stood up as well, and for the first time since he had started talking, he looked directly at me. I think we should separate, he said quietly. I've already spoken to a lawyer about divorce proceedings. The word divorce hung in the air between us like a physical presence. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and my family's support system crumbled in that moment. This wasn't just about missing my graduation. This was about the end of everything I had built my adult life around. The days following David's divorce announcement passed in a haze of shock and growing comprehension. What I had initially perceived as thoughtless family scheduling conflicts gradually revealed itself as something far more calculated and cruel. The truth emerged in pieces, each new revelation adding another layer to my understanding of how thoroughly I had been betrayed. It started with a tearful confession from Emma 2 days after graduation. She came to my bedroom around midnight, her face streaked with tears and her hands shaking as she sat on the edge of my bed. Mom, I need to tell you something about Uncle Tom's barbecue, she whispered, glancing toward the hallway as if afraid David might overhear us. What about it, sweetheart? It wasn't really a barbecue, Emma said, her voice breaking. I mean, there was food and everything, but that wasn't why Dad wanted us there. Uncle Tom called it a family meeting. They spent most of the time talking about Dad's situation. My heart sank as I processed her words. What situation? Dad told everyone that you've been different since you started school. He said you don't care about our family anymore, and that he's been unhappy for years. Uncle Tom and Grandma and Aunt Jennifer all talked about how hard it must be for Dad to deal with your changes. Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, looking younger than her 16 years. They made it sound like you were the problem, Mom. Like Dad was this poor victim who needed support from the family. But I was watching Dad's face while they talked, and he didn't look sad or hurt. He looked satisfied, like everything was going according to plan. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Emma, did your father ask Uncle Tom to schedule the barbecue for graduation day? She nodded miserably. I heard them talking about it on the phone a few days ago. Dad said it would be better if you were alone when he talked to you about the divorce. He thought you might make a scene if the family was around, and this way he could control the narrative. Control the narrative. My husband had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to isolate me on one of the most important days of my life, ensuring that when he delivered his devastating news, I would have no support system to turn to. Over the next few days, more details emerged through uncomfortable conversations with family members. When I called Tom directly to confront him about the barbecue, his defensive tone confirmed my worst suspicions. Look, Maggie, David reached out to me because he was struggling. Tom said, his voice taking on the condescending tone he had used with me since we were children. He felt like you had become so focused on yourself that you weren't being a good wife or mother anymore. And you believed him? I asked, and unable to keep the hurt out of my voice. I've seen the changes in you over the past few years, Tom replied. You're always talking about school and your clinical rotations and your future career plans. When was the last time you asked David how his day went, or showed interest in what the kids were doing at school? The accusations were so far from reality that I almost laughed. David rarely shared details about his work, usually responding to my questions with one-word answers or complaints about his boss. And I had attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, and every sports game that didn't conflict with my class schedule. But Tom continued apparently oblivious to how his words were landing. David said, "You've been selfish and obsessed with your own goals for years." He needed family support to help him figure out what to do about his marriage. "So you decided to help him by making sure no one came to my graduation." "That was just timing," Tom said, though his tone suggested he knew how weak that excuse sounded. David needed to talk to the family about his situation, and I had already planned the barbecue. It was a lie, and we both knew it. But Tom had always been protective of his position as the family patriarch, the person everyone turned to for advice and support. Having David come to him with marriage problems had probably made him feel important and needed. My conversation with my mother was even more painful. When I called to ask why she had chosen Tom's gathering over my graduation, her response revealed how effectively David had poisoned the family against me. "Honey, I didn't realize you felt so strongly about us being there," Mom said, her voice carrying the carefully measured tone she used when she was trying to avoid conflict. "David explained that you've been so independent lately, so focused on your own life, that family events don't seem to matter much to you anymore." "Mom, this was my college graduation. After 7 years of school. How could you think it didn't matter to me?" "Well, you never made it sound like a big deal," she said defensively. "And David seemed to really need family support right now. He's been going through such a difficult time with your marriage." The gaslighting was breathtaking. David had somehow convinced my own mother that I was the problem in our marriage, that my pursuit of education and career goals made me selfish and uncaring. He had painted himself as a long-suffering husband whose wife had abandoned her family responsibilities in favor of personal ambitions. As I pieced together more of the story through conversations with my sister Jennifer and other family members, the scope of David's manipulation became clear. He had been laying this groundwork for months, possibly even years, gradually building a case against me in the court of family opinion. At Christmas dinner, he had made comments about how I was always studying and couldn't seem to enjoy family time anymore. During Easter brunch, he had sighed dramatically when I mentioned an upcoming clinical rotation, suggesting to everyone present that my school schedule was a constant source of stress for our household. He had positioned himself as the devoted father who had to pick up my slack, the patient husband who supported my dreams even when they inconvenienced the family. Every sacrifice I made for school was reframed as evidence of my selfishness. Every hour I spent studying was presented as time stolen from my children and husband. The most devastating revelation came when I discovered that David had been having regular phone conversations with a coworker named Lisa for the past 8 months. Emma reluctantly admitted that she had overheard some of these calls, during which David complained extensively about our marriage and received what sounded like encouragement to put himself first for once. Lisa, it turned out, was recently divorced herself and had strong opinions about women who changed the rules of marriage by pursuing careers and independence. She had apparently convinced David that my nursing school aspirations were a threat to our relationship and that he deserved a partner who would prioritize his needs above her own ambitions. The affair wasn't physical as far as I could determine, but it was deeply emotional. David had found someone who validated his resentment of my goals and encouraged him to see my achievements as attacks on his masculinity and authority as head of our household. Everything finally made sense. The family barbecue hadn't been a last-minute idea or an unfortunate scheduling conflict. It had been a carefully orchestrated gathering designed to build support for David's version of our marriage problems before he blindsided me with divorce papers. My own family had been turned against me through months of careful manipulation, and I had been too focused on finishing school to see it happening. The graduation day betrayal wasn't just about missing a ceremony. It was the final move in a chess game I didn't even know I was playing. Once I understood the full scope of David's manipulation, something shifted inside me. The heartbreak and confusion transformed into a cold, calculated anger that reminded me of the analytical thinking I had developed during my nursing training. If David wanted to play games, I would show him what 7 years of medical education had taught me about strategy documentation and attention to detail. My first step was to secure legal representation. Through my nursing school network, I connected with Patricia Williams, a family law attorney, who specialized in cases involving financial deception and parental alienation. Patricia had a reputation for thorough preparation and aggressive advocacy for her clients' qualities that seemed essential given what I was up against. The first thing we need to do is document everything, Patricia explained during our initial consultation. Your husband has been building a narrative for months. We need to build a better one backed up with evidence. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly gathering information, while David continued to believe he held all the advantages. I documented our financial records, including bank statements, credit card bills, and tax returns from the past 5 years. What I discovered made my blood boil. David had been secretly moving money into a separate savings account for the past year, transferring small amounts that he probably thought I wouldn't notice. The account, which I only discovered through careful examination of our bank statements, contained over $15,000 that should have been part of our joint assets. More disturbing was what I found when I analyzed our credit card statements. During the months when David had been complaining most loudly about the financial strain of my tuition payments, he had been spending hundreds of dollars on dinners and entertainment. The dates and amounts coincided perfectly with his phone records, which showed lengthy conversations with Lisa during the same time periods. While I was eating ramen noodles for lunch to save money for textbooks, David had been taking his emotional affair partner out for expensive meals and claiming the costs were work-related business expenses. I also discovered that David had been lying to me about his work schedule. He claimed to be putting in overtime hours to compensate for the money I was spending on school, but his actual time card records showed he was leaving work early several days each week. Those missing hours coincided with more phone calls to Lisa and credit card charges at coffee shops and restaurants across town. Armed with this documentation, Patricia and I developed a comprehensive strategy. When David served me with divorce papers the following week, clearly expecting me to be overwhelmed and helpless, I was ready with a counterfiling that exposed his financial deception and demanded a full accounting of all marital assets. The look on his face when my attorney's paperwork arrived was worth every sleepless night I had spent gathering evidence. David had expected to control the divorce proceedings, probably planning to paint me as an unfit mother, whose educational pursuits had damaged our family. Instead, he found himself on the defensive, forced to explain why he had been hiding money and lying about his whereabouts. But I wasn't finished. My nursing degree had already opened doors to employment opportunities that David apparently hadn't considered. Within a week of filing my countermotion, I had secured a position at Regional Medical Center with a starting salary that was 30% higher than what David earned at the auto parts store. The timing was perfect. When we met with our attorneys to discuss temporary support arrangements, I was able to demonstrate that I was financially capable of supporting myself and contributing substantially to our children's expenses. David's narrative about me being dependent on him for financial security crumbled immediately. Meanwhile, I began rebuilding relationships with family members who had been turned against me. The key was approaching them with facts rather than emotions, using the same methodical communication style I had learned in nursing school for dealing with difficult patients and families. I started with my sister Jennifer, inviting her to lunch, and calmly explaining what I had discovered about David's financial deception and emotional affair. I showed her documentation of the hidden bank account and the pattern of lies about his work schedule. "I'm not asking you to take sides," I told her. "I just want you to understand that David's version of our marriage problems isn't complete. There are things happening that he didn't mention during Tom's barbecue." Jennifer was shocked by the evidence, particularly the financial deception. "I had no idea he was hiding money from you," she said. "David made it sound like you were being irresponsible with family finances by spending money on school." Did it seem odd to you that Tom scheduled a family gathering on my graduation day?" I asked. Jennifer's face reddened with embarrassment. "Actually, yes. When Tom first mentioned it, I thought the timing was strange. But David insisted it was important that everyone be there to discuss the family situation. What if I told you that David had been planning to ask for a divorce for months, and the barbecue was designed to make sure I would be isolated when he delivered the news?" As Jennifer processed this information, I could see her beginning to understand how she had been manipulated. The same pattern played out with other family members as I methodically presented evidence of David's deception and manipulation. My mother was the most difficult to convince, partly because she had always liked David, and partly because admitting she had been wrong about the graduation situation would require acknowledging that she had deeply hurt her own daughter based on false information. But even Mom couldn't argue with bank statements and phone records. When I showed her the evidence of David's hidden assets and emotional affair, she broke down crying. "I'm so sorry, Maggie," she said. "I should have been at your graduation. I should have known that day was important to you regardless of what anyone else said." The most satisfying moment came when Tom tried to defend David, even after seeing the evidence of financial deception. He insisted that marriage problems were complicated, and that David's actions didn't necessarily make him the villain in our relationship. "You're right that marriage problems are complicated," I replied calmly. "But stealing money from your spouse and lying about affairs aren't marriage problems. They're character problems." I had learned something valuable from my nursing training about dealing with difficult people. Emotions rarely change minds, but facts presented calmly and persistently often do. By approaching my family with documentation rather than drama, I was able to systematically dismantle David's carefully constructed narrative. Within a month, the family dynamic had completely shifted. Instead of seeing me as the selfish wife who had abandoned her responsibilities, they began to understand that I was the victim of a calculated campaign designed to isolate me and steal my assets. David, meanwhile, found himself increasingly alone. His emotional affair partner Lisa apparently lost interest once she realized he wasn't the poor, misunderstood husband she had thought she was rescuing. His attempts to maintain family support crumbled as more evidence of his deception emerged. The final blow came when Emma, who had initially seemed neutral about the divorce, asked to speak with the judge privately about her custody preferences. She told the court that she wanted to live primarily with me because she had lost respect for her father's dishonesty and manipulation. "I used to think Mom was too focused on school," Emma explained to me later. "But now I realize that Dad was lying to us about a lot of things. He made you seem like the bad guy when he was actually the one tearing our family apart." 6 months after that devastating graduation day, I stood in my new apartment looking around at a space that was entirely my own for the first time in my adult life. The divorce settlement had been more favorable than I had dared to hope thanks to Patricia's thorough documentation of David's financial deception and the judge's obvious disapproval of his manipulation tactics. I had been awarded the house, which I promptly sold to eliminate the mortgage and provide a fresh start for the children and me. The apartment I chose was smaller, but perfectly suited to our new life. It had large windows that filled the space with natural light, a kitchen table where Emma and Jake could do homework while I prepared dinner, and a small home office where I could handle paperwork without feeling like I was neglecting my family. My position at Regional Medical Center had exceeded all my expectations. The work was challenging and meaningful, exactly what I had hoped for during those long years of study. My colleagues respected my dedication and clinical skills, and several patients had specifically requested me for their care, saying, "I made them feel heard and supported during frightening medical experiences." The financial independence was transformative. For the first time in my adult life, I could make decisions about money without having to justify or negotiate every purchase. When Emma needed new clothes for her senior year of high school, I could take her shopping without worrying about whether we could afford it. When Jake wanted to join the robotics club at school, I could pay the fees without having to choose between his activities and our groceries. But the most profound change was in my relationship with my children. Without David's constant undermining and manipulation, both Emma and Jake seemed to relax and open up in ways I hadn't seen in years. Emma had initially been angry about the divorce, blaming me for breaking up our family. But as she learned more about her father's deception and witnessed my strength in rebuilding our lives, her perspective shifted dramatically. "Mom, I need to apologize to you," she said one evening as we sat together on the couch, both of us reading after dinner. "I spent years thinking you were being selfish by going to school. Dad always made it seem like you were choosing your education over our family." "You don't need to apologize, sweetheart," I replied. "You were a child dealing with adult problems. That wasn't your responsibility." "But I should have seen what was really happening," Emma insisted. "Dad was making you the villain when he was the one lying and cheating and stealing money. I'm proud of you for finishing school and for standing up to him when he tried to destroy you." Emma's respect for my choices had a profound impact on her own goals and self-confidence. She began talking seriously about college for the first time, asking me about different career paths and expressing interest in fields like social work and counseling where she could help other people navigate difficult family situations. "I want to be strong like you," she told me. "I want to have my own career and my own money, so I never have to depend on anyone who might try to control me." Jake's transformation was equally remarkable. Without the constant tension in our household, he became more talkative and affectionate. He started asking me about my work at the hospital, genuinely curious about what I did during my shifts and how I helped patients feel better. "Are you happier now, Mom?" he asked one morning over breakfast, his question catching me completely off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "You smile more," he said simply, "and you don't look worried all the time like you used to." He was right. The constant anxiety I had carried during the final years of my marriage had lifted. I no longer walked on eggshells wondering whether David would criticize my cooking or complain about my study schedule or make sarcastic comments about my career goals. My family relationships had also undergone significant healing. My mother made a point of attending every important event in my life now as if trying to make up for missing my graduation. When I received an excellence award at work 3 months after starting my position, she drove 2 hours to attend the ceremony and took dozens of pictures of me receiving the recognition. "I'm so proud of you," she said afterward, tears in her eyes. "I should have been there for your graduation, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But I want you to know that I see how hard you worked and how much you accomplished, and I think you're incredible." Even Tom had gradually come around, though it took longer for him to admit he had been wrong about David's manipulation. When he finally apologized, it was awkward and somewhat grudging, but it represented progress in our relationship. "I should have questioned David's version of events," he admitted during a family barbecue that actually celebrated my accomplishments rather than undermining them. "I let him convince me that you were the problem when he was the one lying to everyone." The most unexpected blessing of my new life was the sense of possibility that surrounded every day. During my marriage, I had felt trapped by financial limitations, family obligations, and David's constant negativity about my goals. Now, with my nursing career established and my children thriving, I could envision a future full of opportunities. I was considering pursuing my master's degree to become a nurse practitioner, which would allow me to take on even more responsibility and make a greater impact on patient care. I had started dating again, something that terrified and excited me in equal measure. The men I met now saw me as an accomplished professional with interesting stories to tell rather than just someone's wife who had hobbies that inconvenienced her family. As I reflected on everything that had happened since that devastating graduation day, I realized that David's betrayal, while painful, had ultimately set me free. His attempt to destroy my confidence and isolate me from my support system had backfired spectacularly. Instead of breaking me down, his manipulation had forced me to discover just how strong and capable I really was. The woman who had sat alone at her graduation ceremony, wondering how her family could choose a barbecue over her achievement, no longer existed. In her place was someone who knew her own worth, who surrounded herself with people who celebrated her successes rather than resenting them, and who had learned that the most important approval she needed was her own. Standing in my bright, peaceful apartment with my nursing diploma hanging proudly on the wall, I understood that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can also be the best thing that happens to you. David's betrayal had hurt me deeply, but it had also revealed truths about myself and my relationships that I might never have discovered otherwise. I was exactly where I was meant to be, doing work that mattered, raising children who respected my strength, and living a life that was authentically mine. The graduation day that had started as my biggest disappointment had become the catalyst for my greatest transformation. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's betrayal actually became the push you needed to discover your own strength? I'd love to hear about your experiences with overcoming family manipulation in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who might need to hear about the power of perseverance and self-advocacy. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about turning life's biggest challenges into opportunities for growth and transformation. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the people who try to tear you down are actually showing you just how high you're capable of rising. Keep fighting for your dreams, because you deserve a life where your achievements are celebrated, not sabotaged.